experience and without enough capital. Many entrepreneurs have a great product or service, but don't have the business skills to build a successful business around that product or service. Building the parachute. My rich dad said, starting a business is like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. In midair, the entrepreneur begins building a parachute and hopes it opens before hitting the ground. He also said, if the entrepreneur hits the ground before the parachute is built, it is very tough to climb back into the plane and try again. For those of you familiar with the Rich Dad books, you know that I have jumped out of the plane many times and failed to build the parachute. The good news is that I hit the ground and bounced. This book will share with you some of my jumps, falls, and bounces. Many of my failures and successes were small ones, so the bounce was not that painful. That is, until I started my nylon and Velcro wallet business. I will go into further detail throughout the book because I made many mistakes and learned from them along the way. The success of that business was sky high, and so was the fall. It took me over a year to recover from that powerful bounce. The good news is that it was the best business experience of my life. I learned a lot about business and about myself through the process of rebuilding. The crack in the dam. One of the reasons I fell so hard in the nylon surfer wallet business was that I did not pay attention to the little things. There is some truth to the age-old statement, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. My little surfer wallet business grew so fast that the business was a lot bigger than the capabilities of the 3 entrepreneurs who created the business. Instead of creating a business, we had created Dr. Frankenstein's monster and did not realize it. In other words, our sudden success was accelerating our failures. The real problem was that we did not know we were failing. We thought we were successful. We thought we were rich. We thought we were geniuses. Even though we consulted expert advisors, like patent attorneys, we did not listen to them. As 3 successful entrepreneurs in our late 20s and early 30s, we took our minds off the business and partied into the night. We actually thought we had built a business. We actually thought we were entrepreneurs. We actually believed our own story of success. We started bragging. Champagne started to flow. It was not long before we each had fast sports cars and were dating even faster women. Success and money had blinded us. We could not see the cracks forming in the wall of the dam. Finally, the dam broke. The house of cards started tumbling down around us. Our parachute did not open. Too much success. The point in sharing my entrepreneurial stupidity is that many people think that it is the lack of success that kills a business. In many cases, that is true. The failure of my surfer wallet business was a valuable experience because I found out early in my career as an entrepreneur that too much success can also kill a business. The point I am making is that a poorly conceived business can fail whether it is initially successful or not. Hard work covers up poor design. A poorly conceived business startup may be able to survive as long as the entrepreneur works hard and holds the business together with sheer determination. In other words, hard work can cover up a poorly designed business and keep it from failing. The world is filled with millions of small business entrepreneurs who are able to keep their leaky business afloat with hard work, sheer willpower, duct tape, and baling wire. The problem is, if they stop working, the business breaks apart and sinks. All over the world, entrepreneurs kiss their families goodbye and head off to their own businesses, their pieces of the rock. Many of them go to work, thinking that working harder and longer will solve their business problems. Problems such as not enough sales, unhappy employees, incompetent advisors, not enough cash flow to grow the business, increases in suppliers' prices, rising insurance premiums, increases in landlords' rent, changing government regulations, government inspectors, increasing taxes, back taxes, unhappy customers, non-paying customers, and not enough time in the day, to name a few. Many entrepreneurs do not realize that many of the problems their businesses face today began yesterday, long before there was a business. One of the primary reasons for the high failure rate of small businesses is sheer exhaustion. It's tough to make money and keep going when so much of your time is tied up in activities that do not make you any money or that cost you money without offsetting income. If you are thinking about starting your own business, before you quit your job, you might want to talk to some entrepreneurs about how much time they spend on non-income producing activities to run their business and how they handle this challenge. As a friend of mine once said, I'm so busy taking care of my business that I don't have time to make any money. Do long hours and hard work guarantee success? A friend of mine quit his high-paying job with a large bank in Honolulu and opened a tiny lunch shop in the industrial part of town. He had always wanted to be his own boss and do his own thing. As a loan officer for the bank, he saw that the richest customers of the bank were entrepreneurs, and he wanted a piece of the action. So he quit his job and went for his dream. Every morning, he and his mom would get up at 4 o'clock to begin preparing for the lunch crowd. The two of them worked very hard, scrimping and cutting corners in order to serve great-tasting lunches with generous portions at low prices. For years, I would stop by, have lunch, and find out how they were doing. They seemed very happy, enjoying their customers and their work. Someday we'll expand, said my friend. Someday we'll hire people to do the hard work for us. The problem was that someday never came. His mom passed away, the business closed, and my friend took a job as manager of a fast food franchise restaurant. He returned to being an employee. The last time I saw him, he said, "The pay isn't great, but at least the hours are better." In his case, his parachute did not open. He hit the ground before he built a business. Now, I can hear some of you saying, "At least he went for it," or "It was just bad luck. If his mom had lived, they might have expanded and gone on to make a lot of money," or "How can you criticize such good, hard-working people?" And I agree with these sentiments. My intent is not to criticize them. Although not related to them, I loved the two of them dearly. I knew they were happy, yet it pained me to see them work so hard and not get ahead day after day. I only relate this story to make the same point. The business began to fail before there was a business. It was poorly conceived before he quit his job. Is being an entrepreneur for you? If this story about working long hours, or failing if unsuccessful and possibly failing if successful, or jumping out of a plane without a parachute and bouncing frightens you, then being an entrepreneur may not be for you. But if the stories intrigue you or challenge you, then continue listening. After finishing this book, at least you will have a better idea of what entrepreneurs need to know to succeed. You will also have a better understanding of how to create, design, and build a business that grows with or without you, and possibly makes you rich beyond your wildest dreams. After all, if you are going to jump out of a plane without a parachute, you might as well win big if you are going to win at all. The job of an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur's most important job begins before there is a business or employees. The job of an entrepreneur is to design a business that can grow, employ many people, add value to its customers, be a responsible corporate citizen, bring prosperity to all those who work on the business, be charitable, and eventually no longer need the entrepreneur. Before there is a business, a successful entrepreneur is designing this type of business in his or her mind's eye. According to my rich dad, this is the job of a true entrepreneur. Failure leads to success. After one of my demoralizing business failures, I went to Rich Dad and asked, "So, what did I do wrong? I thought I designed it well." "Obviously, you didn't," Rich Dad said with a smirk. "How many times do I have to do this? I'm the biggest failure I know." Rich Dad said, "Losers quit when they fail. Winners fail until they succeed." Shuffling the papers at his desk for a moment, he then looked up at me and said, "The world is filled with wannabe entrepreneurs. They sit behind desks, have important sounding titles like vice president, branch manager, or supervisor, and some even take home a decent paycheck. These wannabe entrepreneurs dream of someday starting their own business empire. Maybe someday some of them will. Yet I believe most will never make the leap. Most will have some excuse, some rationalization such as, when the kids are grown, or I'll go back to school first, or when I have enough money saved. But they never jump from the plane," I said, finishing his thoughts. Rich Dad nodded. What kind of entrepreneur do you want to be? Rich Dad went on to explain that the world is filled with different types of entrepreneurs. There are entrepreneurs who are big and small, rich and poor, honest and crooked, for-profit and not-for-profit, saint and sinner, small town and international, successful and failing. He said, "The word entrepreneur is a big word, and it means different things to different people." The cash flow quadrant. As I mentioned in the introduction, the cash flow quadrant explains that there are 4 different types of people who make up the world of business. They are often different people technically, emotionally, and mentally. E stands for employee. S stands for self-employed or small business owner. B stands for big business owner. I stands for investor. For example, employees will always say the same words, whether they are the president of the company or the janitor. An employee always says, "I'm looking for a safe, secure job with benefits." The operative words are safe and secure. In other words, the emotion of fear often keeps them boxed in that quadrant. If they want to change quadrants, not only are there skills and technical things to learn, but in many cases, they also have emotional challenges to overcome. A person in the S quadrant may say, "If you want it done right, do it yourself." In many cases, this person's challenge is learning to trust other people to do a better job than he or she can. This lack of trust often keeps them small, since it's hard to grow a business without eventually trusting other people. If S quadrant people do grow, they often grow as a partnership, which in many cases is a group of S's binding together to do the same job. B quadrant people are always looking for good people and good business systems. They do not necessarily want to do the work themselves. They want to build a business to do the work. A true B quadrant entrepreneur can grow his or her business all over the world. An S quadrant entrepreneur is often restricted to a small area, an area he or she can personally control. Of course, there are always exceptions. I quadrant people, investors, are looking for smart S's or B's to take care of their money and grow it. Rich Dad trained his son and me to first build a successful S quadrant business that had the capability of expanding into a successful B quadrant business. That is what this book is about. What kind of business do you want to build? As part of my entrepreneurial training with Rich Dad, he encouraged his son and me to go out and study as many different types of business systems as we could. He said, "How can you be an entrepreneur designing a business if you do not know about the different types of businesses and entrepreneurs?" Self-employed entrepreneurs. Rich Dad was adamant in explaining that many entrepreneurs are not business owners, but self-employed entrepreneurs who own a job, not a business. He said, "You are probably self-employed if your name is the name of the business, if your income stops if you stop working, if clients come to see you, or your employees call you if there is a problem. You may also be self-employed if you are the smartest, most talented, or the best educated person in your business." He had nothing against self-employed entrepreneurs. He simply wanted us to know the difference between entrepreneurs who own businesses and those who own jobs. Consultants, musicians, actors, cleaning people, restaurant owners, small shop owners, and most small business people fall into the S quadrant and own jobs instead of businesses. The main point Rich Dad was making about the difference between a self-employed entrepreneur and a big business entrepreneur is that many self-employed businesses have a tough time growing into a big business. In other words, they have a real challenge going from the S quadrant to the B quadrant. Why? Again, the answer is that the business was poorly designed before there was a business. It was doomed before it even started. Rich Dad himself started out as a self-employed entrepreneur in the S quadrant, yet in his mind, he was designing a very large business, run by people much smarter and more capable. Before he started his business, he designed his S quadrant business to be able to grow into the B quadrant. Professionals and tradespeople. He also wanted us to know that many professional people, such as doctors, lawyers, accountants, architects, plumbers, and electricians, start a self-employed style of business based on a profession or a technical trade. Many of these professions and trades require government licenses to operate. Also included in this category are professional salespeople, many of whom are licensed independent consultants, such as real estate, insurance, and securities salespeople. Many of these types of people are technically self-employed entrepreneurs, aka independent contractors. The problem with this type of business is that there is not really a business to sell because there really isn't a business outside of the individual owner. In many cases, there really isn't an asset. The business owner is the asset. If he or she does sell, he or she will not typically get the higher multiples a true B quadrant business can command. In addition, he or she may have to agree to stay on for the successful continuation of the business. In essence, they go from being the owner to the buyer's employee. In my Rich Dad's mind, it made no sense to work hard and not build an asset. This is why he advised his son and me against ever wanting to become employees. He said, "Why work hard and build nothing?" Later in this book, we will go into some ways this type of entrepreneur can create a business asset, an asset they can build and maybe sell someday. Mom and pop operations. A very large category of entrepreneurs is often referred to as mom and pop businesses. This type of business gets its name because many small businesses are family businesses. As an example, my mom's mother owned a little convenience store that the family took turns working in. The challenge for growth in a mom and pop operation is nepotism. Many people put their children in charge of the business even though their children may be incompetent because blood is thicker than water. Often, the children don't share the passion for the business that their parents had or they don't have the entrepreneurial drive to lead the business. Franchises. A franchise, such as McDonald's, is in theory a turnkey operation. The entrepreneur sells a ready-made business to a person who does not want to go through the creative and development phase of starting a business. It's like being an instant entrepreneur. One advantage to some franchises is that banks are more inclined to lend money to someone who wants to buy a franchise than to a person who wants to start a business from scratch. The banks are more comfortable with the successful track record of similar franchises, and the banks value the mentoring programs that most franchises have to assist the new entrepreneur. One of the biggest problems with big-name franchises is that they are generally more expensive to get into and have little flexibility for a budding entrepreneur. Franchises are the type of businesses that typically face legal issues and often end up in court. These fights are some of the most vicious fights in the business world. Reportedly, one of the main reasons for fighting is that people who buy a franchise business do not want to run it the way the franchisor, the person who created the business, wants them to run it. Also, if the franchise does not do well financially, the franchisee may want to blame the franchisor for the lack of business success. If you do not want to follow the directions of the franchisor to a T, it is best you design, create, and start your own business. Network marketing and direct sales. The network marketing and direct sales industry is recognized by many to be the fastest growing business model in the world today. It is also the most controversial. Many people still have a negative reaction, claiming that many network marketing organizations are pyramid schemes. Yet, in reality, the biggest pyramid scheme in the world is the traditional big business corporation, with one person at the top and all the workers below. Everyone who wants to be an entrepreneur should take a look at a network marketing business. Some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies distribute their products through a network marketing or direct sales system. I am not a member of any one network marketing or direct marketing business, but I do speak favorably of the industry. People who want to be entrepreneurs should consider joining one of these businesses before they quit their jobs. Why? Many of these companies provide essential training in sales, business building, and leadership skills not found anywhere else. One of the most valuable benefits from associating with a reputable organization is that it teaches the mindset as well as the courage required to become an entrepreneur. You will also become more familiar with the systems required to build a successful business. The entry fee is typically quite reasonable, and the education can be priceless. To further explain the educational value of such types of business, please go to our website, richdad.com, to see 2 books on the subject: The Business School for People Who Like Helping People and The Business of the 21st Century. If I were starting my entrepreneurial career all over again, I would start with a network marketing or direct sales business, not for the money, but for the real-world business training I could receive. Training similar to the type of training my rich dad gave me. Legal thieves. One of the more interesting discussions Mike and I had with Rich Dad involved the subject of entrepreneurs stealing from other entrepreneurs. Rich Dad used an accountant working for an accounting firm as an example. One day the accountant, who was an employee of the firm, resigned and started his own business with clients he met while an employee of the firm. In other words, the accountant walked out the firm's door but took the business with him. Rich Dad said, "While this may not be illegal, it still is stealing." While this is one type of business design, it is definitely not the kind of entrepreneur he wanted his son and me to be. Creative entrepreneurs. The type of entrepreneur he wanted us to be was a creative entrepreneur, like Thomas Edison, Walt Disney, or Steve Jobs. Rich Dad said, "It is easy to be a small entrepreneur, like a mom-and-pop sandwich shop. It is also relatively easy to be an entrepreneur in a trade or a profession, such as a plumber or dentist. And it is easy to be a competitive entrepreneur, someone who sees a good idea, copies the idea, and then competes against the entrepreneur who created the idea." This is what happened to me when I pioneered the nylon and Velcro wallet business. Once we created the market and the awareness of this new product line, competitors came out of the woodwork, and my little business was squashed. Of course, I cannot blame them. I can only blame myself because, once again, I designed the business poorly before there was a business. Even though I took a pounding, Rich Dad was happy that I was learning to be a creative entrepreneur rather than a competitive one. He said, "Some entrepreneurs win by creating. Other entrepreneurs win by copying and competing. The riskiest of all types of entrepreneur is the creative entrepreneur, also known as an innovator." "Why is the creative entrepreneur the riskiest type to be?" I asked. "Because being creative means you are often a pioneer. It is easy to copy a successful and proven product. It is also less risky. If you learn to innovate, create, or invent your way to success, you are an entrepreneur creating new value rather than an entrepreneur who wins by copying." Public and private. The vast majority of large and small businesses are private companies. A large private company is often referred to as a closely held company. That generally means a company owned by just a few owners, and ownership interests are not available to the public at large. A public company is a company that sells shares of the business to the public at large, most often through stockbrokers and other licensed securities dealers. A public company sells its shares on a stock exchange like the New York Stock Exchange and operates under much more stringent rules than private companies. Rich Dad never formed a public company, yet he recommended that Mike and I create one as part of our development as entrepreneurs. In 1996, at the same time we were forming the Rich Dad Company, I was also an investor and involved in forming 3 public companies. One company was created to explore for oil, one for gold, and one for silver. The oil company failed, even though it struck oil, which is a story in itself. The gold and silver companies did find substantial amounts of the gold and silver they were looking for. Although the oil company failed, the gold and silver companies made the investors a lot of money. Working on developing the public companies was a great experience. As Rich Dad suggested, I learned a lot and became a better entrepreneur in the process. I found out that the rules are a lot tougher for a public company. A public company is actually 2 different companies serving 2 different customers, the real customers and the investors. A public company also serves 2 bosses, the board of directors and the government securities agency such as the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission. I found out about tougher accounting standards and tougher reporting standards. When I was first starting out as an entrepreneur, Rich Dad said, "The dream of many entrepreneurs is to see the company they formed listed on the stock exchange." Yet, after the Enron, Arthur Andersen, WorldCom, and Martha Stewart scandals, the rules became tighter and the compliance requirements much more complicated and expensive. The government was breathing down public companies' backs. Building a public company business wasn't as much fun as I had expected. Even though I learned a lot, made myself and our investors a lot of money, became a better entrepreneur, learned how to design a public company, and was glad I went through the learning process, I doubt if I will ever form a public company again. That type of business is for a different type of entrepreneur. I can make more money and have more fun and small, closely held private businesses. Can anyone be an entrepreneur? Rich Dad wanted his son and me to understand that anyone can be an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is not that special. He did not want the idea of being an entrepreneur to go to our heads. He did not want us looking down on anyone or thinking we were better than other people if we became successful entrepreneurs. To this, he said, anyone can be an entrepreneur. Your neighborhood babysitter is an entrepreneur. So was Henry Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company. Anyone with a little initiative can be an entrepreneur. So don't think entrepreneurs are special or better than other people. Your job is to decide which entrepreneur you most want to be like, the babysitter or Henry Ford. They both provide a valuable product or service. Both are important to their customers. Yet they operate in very different spectrums, different bandwidths of entrepreneurship. It's like the difference between sandlot football, high school football, college football, and professional football. With that example, I understood the point Rich Dad was making. When I was in college in New York playing college football, our team had the opportunity to practice with a few players from a professional football team, the New York Jets. It was a very humbling experience. It was soon obvious to all of us on the college football team that, while we played the same game as the pro players, we were playing at a completely different level of play. As a linebacker, my first rude awakening was trying to tackle a New York Jets running back coming through the line. I doubt if he even knew I hit him. He ran right over me. It felt like I was trying to tackle a charging rhino. I did not hurt him, but he definitely hurt me. That running back and I were about the same size, but after trying to tackle him, I realized the difference was not physical. It was spiritual. He had the heart, the desire, and the gift of natural talent to be a great player. The lesson I learned that day is that we both played the same game, but we were not playing at the same level of play. The same is true in the business world and the game of entrepreneurship. We can all be entrepreneurs. Being an entrepreneur is not that big a deal. A better question in designing a business is, at what level of play do you want to play the game? Today, older and wiser, I do not have illusions that I would ever be as great an entrepreneur as Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, or Walt Disney. Yet, I can still learn from them and use them as mentors and role models. And that is Rich Dad's entrepreneurial lesson number 1. A successful business is created before there is a business. The most important job of an entrepreneur is to design the business before there is a business. Designing your business. Most new entrepreneurs get excited about a new product or an opportunity they think will make them rich. Unfortunately, many of them focus on the product or opportunity rather than invest the time designing the business around the product or opportunity. Before quitting your job, it might be a good idea to study the lives of entrepreneurs and the different types of businesses they created. You might also want to find a mentor who has been an entrepreneur. All too often, people ask business advice from people who have business experience as an employee, but not as an entrepreneur. Later in this book, we will introduce the BI triangle, which outlines what components are required to create any business, regardless if it is big or small, franchise or individually owned, mom and pop, or publicly owned. Once a person understands the different components that make up a business, it becomes much easier to design businesses as well as evaluate good ones and bad ones. I recommend keeping your daytime job while you start a part-time business. Not for the money, but for the experience. That means even if your part-time business does not make any money, you are gaining something far more important than money: real life experience. Not only will you learn about business, you will learn a lot about yourself. Rich Dad's Entrepreneurial Lesson Number 2: How to Turn Bad Luck into Good Luck. Chapter 2: Dumb and Dumber Get Rich and Richer. My first business. My first business failed in 1956. I was 9 years old. My second business succeeded in 1956. I was still 9 years old. If not for the failure of my first business, my second business would not have succeeded. Failing as a strategy. Failing in business early in life was a defining experience. It was instrumental in developing a success strategy for my future. At the age of 9, I started to realize that making mistakes was the best way for me to learn about business. Although I did not make much money, I realized that the smarter I became by failing and learning from those failures, the richer I would become. Today, in business, I will often do something knowing I might fail. Why? Because at the age of 9, I learned that failing was essential to succeeding. There are two primary reasons why entrepreneurs fail. One is that the would-be entrepreneurs are so afraid of failing that they freeze and then do nothing. They get up and go to work, always with some excuse why they are not ready to quit their jobs and start their businesses. The usual excuses include not enough money, too risky, the time is not right, kids to feed, and many others. The second reason entrepreneurs fail is that they do not fail enough. Many small business owners and self-employed business owners succeed to a point and then stop growing. The business plateaus or begins to die. The business reaches a certain size and then fails to grow. Once again, the entrepreneur needs to risk failing before the business can begin growing. Fear of failing is the primary reason why so many people do not succeed in life or are not as successful as they would like to be. This occurs not only in business, but in all aspects of life. I remember in high school never going on a date because I was so afraid of being rejected. Finally, just before graduating, I asked a beautiful classmate for a date to the senior prom. To my surprise, she said yes. We had a miserable time, but at least I was making progress. Another difference between an employee and an entrepreneur. Recently, during a radio interview, I was called a risk taker by a radio host. I replied, "In today's rapidly changing world, the people who are not taking risks are the risk takers. People who are not taking risks are falling behind." The program was a half-hour show that regularly interviewed different people from different walks of life. The show could have been called The Secret to My Success. When the host asked me for my secret, I told her about my first business failure at the age of 9 and how that failure led to the success of my second business. I then said, I realized that failing was the way to success. "You learned this at 9?" the host asked. "That's correct," I replied. "Like most people, I do not like failing. I hate it. Yet, that business failure early in life gave me a glimpse into the future. I saw my process for success. Some people get ahead by knowing all the right answers. Those people generally do well in school. That is not my process. I get ahead by failing. That is why I have started so many different businesses. More have failed than succeeded, yet the ones that have succeeded have been pretty big successes, like the success of my real estate company, the 2 public gold and silver mining companies I helped found, and the Rich Dad Company. Also, I did not make much money early in my career as an entrepreneur, but now, later in life, I make more money than most people. So the secret to your business success is being willing to make mistakes and then learning from them. Yes, that is my job as an entrepreneur. My job is to set new goals, create a plan, make mistakes, and risk failing. The more mistakes I make, the smarter I become. Hopefully, the company grows and prospers from the lessons learned. I'd get fired if I made too many mistakes on the job, replied the radio interviewer. To me, making mistakes and failing is failing. I do everything possible not to make mistakes. I hate making mistakes. I hate feeling stupid. I must know the answers. I feel it is important to do everything the right way, the way the company tells me to do it. And that is why you are a good employee, I replied kindly. Employees are hired to not make mistakes. An employee's job is to follow the rules, do as they are told, and do their job the right way. If employees want to do things their own way, or do not follow the rules or make too many mistakes, they are fired because they are not doing the job they were hired to do. So my job as an employee is to not take risks, and your job as an entrepreneur is to take risks, to make mistakes, and to sometimes fail. Is that what you are saying? Yes, I replied. That difference is the key difference between an entrepreneur and an employee. So you take risks. Is that what you do as an entrepreneur? No, not quite, I said, chuckling. I don't randomly take any risk that comes along. First of all, I had to learn the science of making mistakes and learning from mistakes. Second, I had to learn how to choose the risks I took. The better my skills as an entrepreneur became, the better my judgment at taking calculated risks. Today, I look at taking risks as part of my job. Failing is not fun, but it is necessary for progress. So, do you like failing? Asked the host. No, on the contrary, I hate failing as much as the next person. The difference is, I know that failing is part of the process of my business's success. The moment I fail, I know I am at the point of a breakthrough in learning. It's the point where the new me emerges. The new you, shrieked the radio host. What kind of hocus pocus is that? Well, I replied slowly, we have all experienced this new me experience. For example, when we were babies and could not walk, we stood and fell, stood and fell. Then one day we stopped falling and began to walk. The moment we could walk, we were no longer babies. People called us children, not babies. When we learned to drive a car, we became young adults. Each time we learned a new skill, a new person emerged and our worlds changed. That is what I mean by a new you or a new me. We are new because we have new skills and are better able to face a new world. So there is a world of difference between an employee and an entrepreneur? Asked the host sarcastically. Oh, absolutely, I replied, working hard not to get caught up in her skepticism. We live in very different worlds because we are very different people. One of us lives in a world that thrives on risk. The other lives in a world that avoids risk. Different worlds, different people. There was silence for a moment. The host seemed to be gathering her thoughts. And that is why so many employees do not make it as entrepreneurs? It's one of the reasons, but not the only reason, I said gently. It's not easy transitioning from a world of avoiding mistakes to a world of actively making mistakes. But you make it sound easy, said the host. You seem so nonchalant about failing. I never said it was easy, but it does get easier, I replied. Look, the point is entrepreneurs have a lot to learn and need to learn quickly. They don't have the luxury of a steady paycheck. They must make mistakes and correct quickly. If entrepreneurs avoid making mistakes, or if they pretend they haven't made a mistake or blame someone else for their mistakes, the learning process will overwhelm the entrepreneur and the business fails. You have to learn quickly Because you're making something out of nothing, added the host. There is nothing there to support you, especially in the beginning of your development as an entrepreneur. Yet, as you get better, you can go from nothing to something very quickly. One of the great joys of being an entrepreneur is the ability to take an idea and turn that idea into a successful business in a short period of time. Centuries ago, alchemists were trying to turn lead into gold. An entrepreneur's job is to turn an idea into gold. It's almost money for nothing, said the radio host. Almost, I replied. If you can do that, you'll never need a job. You can go just about anywhere you want in the world and strike it rich. I do business in over 80 countries. One of my mining companies operates in China, and the other operates in South America. An employee or a self-employed person's scope of business is often limited to a town, state, or country. So it is a different world, conceded the host. Yes, I replied. That is the world of an entrepreneur. If you are good, you are free to travel the world and do business. Most employees need to apply for a work visa before they can work in another country. An entrepreneur may enter a country as a corporation or form a joint venture with another corporation in that country. Training yourself to be an entrepreneur is developing your potential to access a world of nearly unlimited wealth. And to do that, you need to learn to turn your failures into successes. That's correct, I replied. And what if you fail and lose money? She asked. It's just part of being an entrepreneur. I do not know many entrepreneurs who have not lost money at one time or another. But if an employee lost the company's money, the employee would be fired, said the host with an edge in her voice. In many companies they would be, I replied quietly. My point is that it is the fear of losing money that costs people the most money. They are so afraid of losing, they lose. They settle for a steady paycheck. They may not lose much money in their life, but they lose out on the potential for great wealth. Truth during the commercial break. I need to take a commercial break, said the host as she shut down the studio. The sound engineer then took over and began to play the commercials that supported the show. I've wanted to quit my job for years, said the host, feeling safer in her soundproof room and not broadcasting to the world. But you are paid too much to quit, I said, completing her thoughts. Nodding, she said, Yeah, that's it. I'm not paid a lot, just enough so I won't quit and go somewhere else. I need my paycheck. My husband and I make a lot of money, but with 4 kids in school, there is no way we can do what you are talking about. Although I did not agree with her point of view, I did let her know I understood how she felt. So, what would you say to me? How do I break out? I need that paycheck. I need this job, even if it doesn't pay much. I feel I am trapped in a room with walls that are closing in around me. What can I do? Taking a moment to collect my thoughts, I finally asked, Do you remember the example I used of the baby learning to walk? Yes, I do, said the host. And once they can walk, the baby becomes a child. And once they learn to drive, they become a young adult. And that is how we learn anything in life. We learn by first having a desire for a change. We want something better. You may have enjoyed your work at one time, but now you know it is time for a change. It's time to move on, just as a baby somehow knows it is time to change. It's time to stop crawling. At some magical point in time, the baby knows when the time is right, when it's time to do something different. The baby begins by clinging to something, like a parent's pants leg or the leg of a table. Babies wobble as they are learning to bridge the gap between crawling and walking. They do this repeatedly, and then one day they let go and fall down. The baby failed. Instead of quitting, which is what many adults would do, the baby repeats the process again and again. Then one day, the baby's mind, body, and spirit come into alignment and the baby can stand. Soon after standing, the baby learns to walk. The baby becomes a child. Then come bicycles and then come cars, said the host. Babies become children and children become adults. I completed the thought by saying, yes, and the process is similar for entrepreneurship. I just happened to start at age 9, failed at 9, and succeeded at 9. You can do the same if you are willing to risk going through your learning process. So you are confident in your skills as an entrepreneur? Asked the host. No, not really. I am confident in my ability to make mistakes, correct, and improve my business. I am a better entrepreneur today, and I plan on getting better. But no, I am never fully confident in my skills as an entrepreneur because I do not rest on my laurels or my past successes. I constantly put myself in situations where I am beyond my skills. I am always on edge, always tentative, always testing myself. That is the way I continually get better. And that is why you start new businesses, even if you fail? Asked the host. I start new businesses even if I succeed. That is why I have so many businesses that run without me. That is my secret to great wealth. Most employees have one job. As an entrepreneur, I have multiple businesses. That's why you do not want to be self-employed or run the business. Yes, and that is why I am glad I failed at the age of 9. At the age of 9, I learned how to start businesses that run without me. I wrote about those businesses in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yes, I remember, said the host. I just did not get the significance of those businesses. I did not realize those tiny businesses would have such a profound impact on your life. Nodding again, I said, I found my strategy for life at the age of 9. The sound engineer then informed us the commercial break was over, and it was time to continue the interview. The host turned on her microphone and said, we only have a few minutes left, so let's wrap this up. You're telling us that an entrepreneur's job is to make mistakes and an employee's job is to not make mistakes. Is that your message? Yes, it is. At least that is the way I see it. If I am not taking calculated risks, not making mistakes, and growing the company, I should be fired. If my employees make too many mistakes, I might have to let them go. That is why I hire smart employees who hate making mistakes. They do their job, I do mine. That is why we say to our kids, go to school so you can get a good job, said the host. Schools are training our kids to be employees. Yes, I replied. If you do well in school, you'll probably do well in the corporate world or in government. Did you like school? Asked the host. Not really, I replied. I did not do well in school because I made too many mistakes. I was a C, D, and on several occasions, an F student. So in school, I figured out that since I was already good at making mistakes, I might as well become an expert at making mistakes. That is why I'm an entrepreneur, not an employee. I am not that academically smart. No one would hire me for a high-paying job. I don't like following orders, so I'd probably never be promoted. I like changing things and doing things my way rather than doing what I am told to do. You would definitely not get a job at this radio station, said the host. I might not get a job here, but I do know how to buy this radio station and hire people smarter than me to run it for me, I added with a hint of humor in my voice. Okay, we have to wrap this up, said the host. Do you have any other examples that show that making mistakes and failing are essential to being an entrepreneur? Is there another example besides you that can support this point of view? Oh, sure, I replied. Thomas Edison was asked to leave school because teachers complained that he was addled or scatterbrained. Later in life, he was criticized for having failed over 1,000 times before inventing his version of the electric light bulb. When asked how he felt about failing over 1,000 times, he said something to the effect of, "I did fail over 1,000 times. I believe it was 1,014 experiments that failed before we finally succeeded. It takes at least 1,000 failures to qualify you to invent a light bulb." What does he mean that it takes at least 1,000 failures to qualify you to invent the light bulb? The host asked. It means if you or I wanted to invent a light bulb today, instead of just buying one from the store, we would probably fail at least 1,000 times before we knew how to make a light bulb. So he was labeled a scatterbrain in school and failed 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb, said the host. That means he is an inventor. How does that make him an entrepreneur? Do you know what company he founded? I asked. No, I do not. He founded General Electric, one of the most powerful companies in the world. It was originally known as Edison General Electric, one of the original 12 members of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Of the original 12, only GE has survived to this day. Not bad for an addle-minded scatterbrain who failed a lot. The interview was over. Learn from your mistakes. My rich dad believed in learning from your mistakes. He did not view mistakes as bad, but simply as opportunities to learn something about business and yourself. He said, mistakes are like stop signs. Mistakes say to you, hey, time to stop, take a moment, you don't know something, it's time to stop and think. Rich Dad also said, a mistake is a signal that it's time to learn something new, something you did not know before. Along that line of reasoning, he also said, too many people are too lazy to think. Instead of learning something new, they think the same thoughts day in and day out. Thinking is hard work. When you are forced to think, you expand your mental capacity. When you expand your mental capacity, your wealth increases. So, every time you make a mistake, stop and take the opportunity to learn something new, something you obviously need to learn. When something does not go your way, or something goes wrong, or you fail, take the time to think. Once you find the hidden lesson, you will be thankful for the mistake. If you are upset, angry, ashamed, blaming someone else for the mistake, or pretending you haven't made a mistake, you haven't been thinking hard enough. Your mental capacity hasn't expanded enough. You haven't learned the lesson, so keep thinking. Poor Dad's philosophy on mistakes. My poor dad, being an educator, had a different point of view on mistakes. To him, making a mistake also indicated you did not know something, but to him, making a mistake meant you were stupid or intellectually challenged. When my poor dad made a mistake, he often pretended he did not make one, denied making one, or blamed someone else for the mistake. He did not view making mistakes as an opportunity to learn and increase one's intellectual capacity. He did his best to avoid making mistakes. He did not view making mistakes as a good thing, like my rich dad did. Bad luck to good luck. Lesson number 2.